If you were told that every thought you hold, every belief you defend, and every dream you chase might not even be yours, would you dare to question it? Or would you surrender and live as a prisoner inside your own mind? Ladies and gentlemen, tonight is not about comfort, it is about confrontation. The greatest chains ever forged were not made of iron. They were crafted in silence, in obedience, in blind acceptance. The war is not out there, it is in here. This is the battle to resist the slave mind. The slave mind is not announced with the clang of chains or the rattle of locks. It creeps in quietly, shaping itself around your daily thoughts, settling into your decisions, disguising itself as reason and common sense. It does not need bars or walls because its strongest prison is invisible. That is why so many live their entire lives in captivity without ever realizing they were captured. They march in straight lines, keep their heads down, follow the instructions, and believe themselves free while their choices have already been pre-written. This is not freedom. It is a silent, subtle form of enslavement, and it is far more dangerous than any iron shackle. Think about the way most people wake up each day. The alarm clock dictates when their eyes open. The schedule tells them where to be. The rules of society decide how they dress, how they speak, even how they think. They do not rebel because rebellion requires recognition of the cage. They accept the rhythm of the machine and even defend it, never realizing that this rhythm is not theirs. It was handed to them. The slave mind convinces them that this routine is normal, respectable, the only way to live. But what is life if it is lived by rules you never wrote, chasing goals you never chose? The greatest trick of the slave mind is to convince you that you are free when you are not. You work hard for rewards that dissolve the moment you hold them. You are told that success means the house, the car, the title. You pursue them with fire only to discover that the fire was not yours. It was lit by someone else. And when the flame dies, you feel empty. That emptiness is not failure. It is the momentary glimpse of truth. You were never free in the first place. The slave mind thrives on compliance. It tells you to obey without question. It whispers that rocking the boat is dangerous, that standing apart is foolish, that silence is safer than speaking. It paints fear as wisdom and submission as strength. But make no mistake, when you obey unquestioned orders, when you silence your doubts because the crowd does not share them, you are not making a choice. You are surrendering the one thing that separates you from livestock, your will. There are people who wear their chains like jewelry. They boast about their obedience, their conformity, their ability to follow the script better than anyone else. They confuse approval for achievement. They call their prison a palace because they decorated the walls. But no matter how fine the furniture, no matter how comfortable the bed, a cage is still a cage. And the slave mind loves a decorated cage because it keeps its prisoner quiet. The mind enslaved is predictable. It avoids risk, clings to safety, and follows the herd. It will never take the road unpaved because it cannot imagine a life where the map is not already drawn. It hides behind phrases like, "This is how it's always been done," and "What will they think?" It cannot bear the weight of responsibility, so it surrenders control. And yet in that surrender, it also surrenders its future. The man or woman who refuses to think, who refuses to choose, has no claim on destiny. They become passengers in their own lives, watching as others steer their ship. Consider the child who dreams. That child believes he can be anything, an explorer, a leader, a creator. His mind is unchained. But slowly, voices begin to whisper, be realistic, don't take risks, stay in line. Those voices are not born of love. They are the voice of the slave mind echoing through others who were already conquered. Little by little, the fire dies, and the child becomes the adult who no longer dreams. That transformation is not natural. It is engineered. The slave mind spreads like a disease, passed from one generation to the next. To understand the slave mind, you must recognize its methods. It thrives on distraction, drowning you in noise so you never hear your own voice. It thrives on comparison, chaining you to the opinions of others. It thrives on fear, teaching you that failure is death and success is only found in approval. Above all, it thrives on repetition. The more you hear the same lie, the more likely you are to believe it. And once belief takes root, the chain is locked. There is no violence in this prison, no whips or guards. The slave mind does not need force. It only needs compliance. It only needs you to stop asking why, because the moment you ask that question, the lock begins to weaken. The moment you dare to see your thoughts as foreign intruders instead of sacred truths, the walls begin to crack. And that is what the slave mind fears most, awareness. For centuries, men and women have broken physical chains, but the true revolution has always been fought in the mind. A people can be conquered physically, but they are never truly defeated until they accept the conqueror's story as their own. When they bow not because they are forced to, but because they believe they must, that is when the battle is lost. That is the essence of the slave mind. And so, the question is not whether the slave mind exists. The question is whether you can see it in yourself. Have you mistaken obedience for virtue? Have you traded your voice for acceptance? Have you silenced your own doubts because they disturb the peace of the herd? These are not small questions. They are the difference between a life lived in quiet captivity and a life claimed in fierce freedom. The slave mind is a master illusionist. It convinces you that you are choosing, when in reality, the choice was scripted long before you made it. But every illusion has a weakness. The chains may be invisible, but they are not unbreakable. They can be shattered the moment you refuse to mistake silence for peace, fear for wisdom, comfort for freedom. And until that moment comes, the prison remains hidden in plain sight, wrapped around your very thoughts. Every belief you carry, every conviction you defend, every opinion you repeat with pride, how many of them are truly yours? That is the question most people never ask. They inherit ideas as if they were heirlooms, never examining whether they are treasures or chains. They wear labels given by others, fight for causes they barely understand, and carry opinions they never earned. This is not thinking. This is programming. And the slave mind thrives on programming. From the moment you are born, voices speak into your life, shaping you before you are capable of choosing. Parents, teachers, media, culture, each adds a layer of instruction. Some of it is guidance, some of it is protection, but much of it is control disguised as wisdom. You are told what to admire, what to fear, who to respect, and who to despise. You learn what success looks like, not because you discovered it, but because someone else defined it. Slowly, Your mind becomes filled with instructions you never wrote, songs you never composed, laws you never voted on. You confuse these voices with your own, and soon the line between your authentic thoughts and the borrowed ones disappears. The slave mind is not imposed with brute force. It is manufactured with repetition. If you are told the same thing often enough, you will begin to accept it as truth, even if it is absurd. This is normal. This is the way it's always been done. This is just how the world works. The more you hear these mantras, the more they become invisible rules guiding your life. And when you begin to police yourself, when you silence your own questions because they contradict the narrative, then the slave mind has succeeded. The oppressor doesn't need to watch you. You become your own warden. Think of the countless people who argue passionately for systems that exploit them. They defend the very chains that hold them down because they cannot imagine life without them. They have been told the system is sacred, and so they protect it with zeal, even as it drains their strength. They mock the dreamer, attack the rebel, and praise the conformist. But this loyalty is not born of wisdom. It is the reflex of conditioning. A well-trained slave will always mistake obedience for virtue. Manufactured beliefs are powerful because they disguise themselves as identity. People do not say, "I was taught to think this way." They say, "This is who I am." They merge the belief with the self, and once that happens, they will defend it to the death, even against overwhelming evidence. The slave mind clings to its illusions because losing them would feel like losing itself. That is why people fight harder to protect a lie than to discover the truth. The lie feels safe. The truth feels like fire. The architects of the slave mind know this. They know that if they can control what you believe, they do not need to control what you do. Your actions will follow naturally. A mind convinced that its chains are freedom will never rebel. A person who believes their obedience is noble will enforce their own servitude. This is why belief is the battlefield. Armies may conquer land, but it is belief that conquers people. And once conquered, they may never even realize they were defeated. But how does one break free if almost every belief has been handed down, whispered, repeated, enforced? The answer begins with doubt. Doubt is the spark that exposes borrowed ideas. Ask yourself, why do I believe this? Where did it come from? Who benefits from me thinking this way? These questions are dynamite to the foundations of the slave mind. They force you to examine whether your convictions are chosen or imposed. They strip the borrowed mask from your face and reveal whether your voice is truly your own. Consider how many people follow trends, not because they want to, but because they fear exclusion. They dress a certain way, speak a certain way, chase certain careers, and mimic certain attitudes because it is easier than being outcast. They are not making choices, they are avoiding consequences. The slave mind has convinced them that acceptance is survival. But in chasing acceptance, they sacrifice individuality. They become echoes instead of voices, shadows instead of light. The danger of manufactured beliefs is that they create illusions of certainty. People would rather believe a comforting lie than confront a difficult truth. They would rather inherit an answer than wrestle with a question. And so the slave mind flourishes. It hands out pre-packaged answers, slogans, and doctrines, and people accept them with gratitude. The world is complicated The slave mind offers simplicity. The world is uncertain. The slave mind offers certainty. And so the masses swallow the bait, never realizing that the hook is buried deep inside. History is filled with moments where entire societies marched in unison toward destruction, convinced they were righteous. The majority was wrong, but they could not see it because the belief was too strong, too widespread, too comfortable. To break from the crowd would have required courage few possessed. That is the price of resisting manufactured beliefs, loneliness. The slave mind thrives because people fear isolation more than they fear lies. And yet freedom is not found in numbers. Truth is not validated by majority vote. Freedom is found in the individual who dares to think when others merely repeat. The person who refuses to inherit their beliefs without interrogation becomes dangerous, not to themselves, but to the systems that rely on blind obedience. That is why rebels are ridiculed, silenced, or demonized, not because they are wrong, but because they threaten the illusion. To escape the slave mind, one must be willing to endure the pain of unlearning. To tear down beliefs you once thought sacred is to experience disorientation, even despair. But this destruction is necessary, for only through unlearning can you rebuild. And when you do rebuild, when your beliefs are forged through choice, examination, and truth rather than repetition and fear, you will know they are yours. You will no longer be a vessel for someone else's programming. You will be the author of your own convictions. The slave mind will always attempt to return. It will whisper that you are safer in the cage, more comfortable with the crowd, more secure with the borrowed answers. But each time you refuse to bow, each time you choose examination over obedience, you weaken its grip, you reclaim another inch of your own mind, and in the end, freedom does not begin with swords or banners. It begins with one decision, repeated endlessly, to reject the manufactured belief and to choose your own. The lure of comfort is one of the most cunning tools of the slave mind. It does not come with threats or warnings. It comes with soft pillows, warm distractions, and promises of safety. Comfort is not given to you because you have won. It is given to you so you forget there is still a battle to fight. It soothes you, quiets you, and convinces you that growth, risk, and struggle are unnecessary. But comfort, when worshipped, becomes the deadliest chain of all. The truth is this: growth has always lived on the other side of discomfort. Every great achievement, every act of transformation was born in fire, not in ease. But the slave mind will tell you otherwise. It whispers that you have earned your rest, that striving is unnecessary, that your current state is good enough. It wants you to settle, to stop pushing, to trade your hunger for pleasure. Because once you accept comfort as your goal, you will no longer demand freedom. You will defend your cage as long as the floor is soft and the walls are padded. Look around at the world. How many people willingly surrender their potential because chasing it feels inconvenient? How many choose the job they hate because it is secure rather than the path they love because it is uncertain? How many spend hours each day numbing themselves with entertainment, substances, or empty rituals, convincing themselves that this is happiness? This is not happiness. This is sedation. And the slave mind feeds on sedation because sedated minds do not rebel. The illusion of comfort is powerful because it feels good. It lulls you into believing that comfort equals peace. But peace without purpose is not peace. It is stagnation. A man who chooses ease over struggle slowly decays, not because his body weakens, but because his spirit rots. The fire that once drove him is extinguished by the endless pursuit of temporary pleasures. The slave mind smiles when this happens because a comfortable prisoner is a quiet prisoner. There is another danger. Comfort disguises itself as reward. People are taught that if they work hard within the system, if they obey the rules, if they avoid risks, they will be given comfort as a prize. And when they receive it, they mistake it for victory. But victory is not found in a couch, a paycheck, or a steady routine. True victory is found in becoming who you are meant to be, no matter how uncomfortable that road may be. The tragedy is that many people never even begin that road because they already feel rewarded enough to stop searching. Consider the warrior who survives battle. He does not grow by resting. He grows by preparing for the next war. Consider the creator who finishes one masterpiece. She does not grow by sitting idle. She grows by challenging herself to create again, to climb higher. Discomfort sharpens. Discomfort builds. Discomfort awakens. Comfort dulls. Comfort weakens. Comfort puts the mind to sleep. That is why the slave mind loves comfort. It is the sweetest poison, a gentle path to surrender. The great question you must ask yourself is this: what comforts are you clinging to that are killing you? What pleasures keep you from progress? What conveniences are quietly robbing you of greatness? Every chain of comfort has a price, and often that price is your destiny. The man who refuses to risk discomfort will never taste victory. The woman who avoids struggle will never discover her strength. And the society that worships comfort above all else will produce citizens who are obedient, passive, and easy to control. To resist the slave mind, you must reject the worship of comfort. This does not mean rejecting all rest, all pleasure, all ease. It means refusing to let them rule you. Rest should be a tool, not a master. Pleasure should be a gift, not a chain. Ease should be a pause, not a prison. When you choose discomfort over sedation, you reclaim your edge. When you embrace struggle, you awaken the warrior within. When you seek purpose instead of pleasure, you declare war on the slave mind. For it is better to sleep on the floor of freedom than to rest on the cushions of captivity. It is better to sweat, bleed, and break on the road to purpose than to sit quietly in a cage built of luxury. Comfort may protect your body, but it will never liberate your soul. The slave mind thrives when you mistake the absence of pain for the presence of life. But the truth is undeniable. Comfort without challenge is not living. It is slow death disguised as ease. Fear is the oldest and most reliable weapon of the slave mind. It does not need swords, shackles, or soldiers when it can bend a man's will with shadows in his own imagination. Fear whispers from the corners of your mind, magnifying doubts, inventing threats, and turning hesitation into paralysis. You do not need to be caged when your own terror builds the bars for you. And so countless lives are quietly stolen, not by violence, but by the invisible leash of fear. Fear takes many forms. It is not always the terror of death or destruction. More often, it is subtle, the fear of rejection. What will people think if you step outside their expectations? The fear of failure. What if you risk everything and lose? The fear of isolation. What if you stand alone while everyone else follows the crowd? These fears, repeated daily, keep more people in chains than any tyrant or army in history. Because the truth is simple. A person who fears being different will never be free. Notice how often people disguise their fears as wisdom. They say, it's better not to risk it. They claim it's smarter to play safe. They label their hesitation as maturity, when in reality it is submission. The slave mind teaches them to rationalize their own cowardice, to polish it, to call it something noble. And because of this, fear continues its work unnoticed. It convinces them that silence is safety, obedience is strength, and avoidance is survival. But what is survival worth if it comes at the cost of never truly living? The danger of fear is not just what it prevents you from doing. It is what it convinces you to never attempt in the first place. The person who fears rejection will never speak their truth. The person who fears failure will never take the leap that could have built their destiny. The person who fears standing alone will never discover their real power, because they will always bow to the crowd. The slave mind thrives here because it knows that the more you fear, the less you will act. And when you stop acting, you stop living. The greatest tragedies are not the battles lost, but the battles never fought. How many songs remain unsung? How many books remain unwritten? How many lives remain unlived because fear convinced someone not to even begin? The graveyard is full of silence, voices, ideas buried in the dark, and dreams that never saw the light of day, not because they were impossible, but because the people who carried them were enslaved by fear. Fear killed them before failure ever had the chance to. And yet, fear itself is not the enemy. It is how you respond to it. Fear is natural. Fear warns you of danger, sharpens your senses, makes you alert. But the slave mind twists fear into a master rather than a servant. Instead of sharpening you, it controls you. Instead of warning you, it cages you. The difference lies in who commands who. Do you control your fear, or does your fear control you? That question separates the free from the enslaved. Imagine a child learning to walk. Every step is uncertain. They stumble, they fall, they bruise, but they get up again and again until walking becomes natural. If that child listened to fear, don't try, you'll fall, you'll get hurt, they would never walk. Yet as adults, we allow fear to do exactly this. We forget that stumbling is not failure, it is progress. We allow fear to magnify the fall and blind us to the growth. The slave mind relies on this forgetfulness, because once you mistake fear for a wall instead of a stepping stone, you will stop climbing. Fear has always been the currency of control. Entire societies are ruled not by law, but by fear. Fear of punishment, fear of exclusion, fear of ruin. And those in power know this well. They do not need to chain your body when they can chain your heart. They do not need to silence your voice when they can make you afraid to use it. A society that trembles is easier to command than a society that questions. And so fear becomes the invisible army that keeps millions in line without a single soldier in sight. But here lies the secret. Fear loses its grip the moment you face it. Fear is loudest before the step is taken, but the moment you act, its voice begins to fade. The speech you were afraid to give loses its terror. Once the words leave your lips, the leap you feared to take loses its power. Once your feet are off the ground, action starves fear. Inaction feeds it. The slave mind thrives when you hesitate, but it withers when you move. The path to freedom, therefore, is not the absence of fear, but the mastery of it. To feel the fear and act anyway. To see the leash and break it with your own hands. To stare into the darkness of uncertainty and step forward regardless. Because courage is not the lack of fear, it is resistance to fear. It is the declaration that no matter what shadows threaten, no matter what voices whisper, you will not surrender your will. Fear is the leash, but the leash only works if the dog accepts it. The moment you refuse to bow your head, the leash falls away. And that moment when fear no longer commands you is the moment you rise above the slave mind. Rebellion is often misunderstood. People imagine riots in the streets, shouts in the air, banners raised against authority. But rebellion is far more subtle, far more personal, and far more powerful than the image of chaos. Rebellion begins within. It is the quiet decision to no longer bow when bowing is expected, the stubborn act of asking why when silence is demanded, the refusal to accept as truth what everyone else repeats without question. The slave mind fears rebellion not because it is loud, but because it is contagious. One person who dares to think differently threatens the entire illusion that keeps millions obedient. The essence of rebellion is defiance, not reckless defiance, not defiance for its own sake, but defiance against lies, against control, against the invisible cages built around thought. A child who asks why the rules exist is already rebelling. A worker who questions whether the system is fair is already rebelling. A citizen who refuses to parrot the approved script is already rebelling. Rebellion does not always roar, sometimes it whispers. And yet, that whisper can crack the silence of entire generations. The slave mind thrives on conformity. It wants everyone to move in rhythm, to think the same thoughts, to pursue the same goals, to worship the same idols. When one person steps out of line, they become a mirror reflecting the lie. Their very existence asks the question, if they can think differently, why can't I? That is why rebels are so dangerous. They do not just liberate themselves, they expose the possibility of liberation to everyone watching. The slave mind must either silence them or ridicule them, because if they are left unchecked, their defiance becomes a spark that spreads. Throughout life, the smallest acts of rebellion often have the greatest power. To say no when everyone else says yes, to speak truth when everyone else echoes lies, to hold your ground when the crowd demands surrender. These moments may not shake empires, but they shake the foundation of your own prison. Each act of rebellion weakens the grip of the slave mind, reminding you that you are not owned. Rebellion is not about conquering the world. It is about reclaiming yourself. And rebellion always has a cost. To resist conformity is to invite resistance. The crowd does not tolerate the one who refuses to chant. They call the rebels arrogant, foolish, even dangerous. They laugh at them, isolate them, punish them, but the punishment is the proof. The backlash is not because the rebel is wrong, but because their courage unsettles the comfortable. When one person stands against the tide, it reminds the rest that they, too, have been swept along blindly. And that realization is unbearable for those who prefer their chains. Rebellion is also misunderstood as chaos, when in truth it is order rediscovered. It is not about destroying for destruction's sake. It is about tearing down lies so truth can stand. The slave mind calls rebels destructive because it cannot admit what they truly are, constructive forces of awakening. To dismantle an illusion is to build reality. To burn the mask is to reveal the face. The rebel does not break the world. The rebel repairs it by refusing to live in deception. The battlefield of rebellion is not always external. It is internal. To rebel is to resist the part of yourself that craves comfort, that fears judgment, that longs for acceptance. It is to wrestle with your own hesitation, to stand firm when your own thoughts beg you to bow. You cannot rebel against the world if you first do not rebel against your own cowardice. That is the hardest war to fight and the most important to win. For once you conquer yourself, no external power can command you. Consider how many people silence themselves daily. They know the truth in their hearts, but choose not to speak, fearing backlash. They know the path they want, but do not walk it, fearing failure. They see injustice, but remain still, fearing consequences. Each of these is a rebellion betrayed, an uprising crushed before it began. The tragedy is not that they lack the power to act, it is that they lack the will. And so the slave mind wins not because it is strong, but because it convinces people that resistance is impossible. But rebellion does not need to be grand. It does not need to topple nations or spark revolutions. Sometimes rebellion is simply living authentically in a world that demands masks. Sometimes rebellion is creating beauty in a culture that worships destruction. Sometimes rebellion is refusing to hate when hatred is fashionable. The slave mind despises such rebellion because it cannot control it. A mind that lives truthfully is ungovernable, even if it never raises its voice. There will always be those who mistake rebellion for arrogance, who confuse independence with hostility, who call strength dangerous. Let them. Their insults are the proof that your defiance matters. Chains are not broken quietly. Rebellion is supposed to disturb, to unsettle, to offend. It is supposed to challenge the very foundations of the cage. And when you feel the resistance from those who demand you stay silent, understand this: their resistance means you are winning. The slave mind survives only in silence. Rebellion is noise. It may be a whisper, it may be a shout, but it disrupts the order of captivity. That disruption is freedom in motion. And once rebellion begins, once one person dares to resist, the illusion begins to collapse. Because nothing is more dangerous to the slave mind than a single individual who looks at the chains, feels the weight of fear, hears the voice of conformity, and still chooses to stand. Identity is the battlefield where the slave mind fights its most ruthless war. It knows that if it can convince you that you are who it says you are, you will spend your entire life acting out a script that was never written by your own hand. You will wake up, work, love, hate, worship, and die believing you have lived authentically, when in truth you have lived as someone else's design. This is not a mistake, it is a theft. The slave mind is a master thief, stealing identity and replacing it with a mask. From childhood, the world rushes to define you. You are given names, labels, categories, expectations. You are told what kind of person you should be, how you should act, what paths are worthy, what dreams are foolish. Before you can even discover your own voice, a chorus of other voices begins to drown it out. The child who once dreamed of becoming limitless is slowly shaped into the adult who accepts limits. Not because limits are real, but because identity has been stolen and replaced with a safe imitation. The tragedy is that most people never even realize their identity was taken. They confuse the roles they were taught to play with who they really are. They introduce themselves with titles, with professions, with achievements, as if those things define their essence. They adopt the beliefs of their community, the attitudes of their peers, the habits of their culture, without asking if those things truly belong to them. In this way, they become actors in a play they never auditioned for, performing for an audience that may not even care. The slave mind thrives in this confusion. It whispers, "This is who you are. Stay in this box. Do not question it." And because questioning identity feels dangerous, most people obey. They are afraid to lose the approval of others, afraid to stand alone, afraid to admit that the life they are living may not be theirs at all. So they continue to wear the mask, smile for the cameras, and repeat the lines, all while the real self, the unchained self, remains buried, unheard, unseen. But what happens when you begin to question? What happens when you ask, who am I without these labels, without these roles, without this borrowed mask? That is the moment the cage begins to crack. The slave mind fears this moment more than anything because it knows identity is power. When you claim your identity, when you refuse to let it be dictated, you become uncontrollable. You become dangerous to the system that thrives on conformity. Identity is not given, it is created. It is carved through struggle, forged through choices, discovered in silence when all other voices are stripped away. To find who you truly are, you must be willing to endure the discomfort of peeling back the layers of falsehood. You must strip away the expectations of family, society, and tradition. You must confront the terrifying possibility that the person you thought you were is nothing more than an echo. And then, with the rubble of lies around you, you must begin the sacred work of building. This process is painful, but it is also liberating. For when you build your identity, you are no longer dependent on the crowd's approval. You no longer bend under the weight of their judgments. You no longer need to perform for acceptance. You become whole, not because others say you are, but because you know it. And in that knowledge lies a power that no system, no narrative, no authority can strip away. Look at those who live authentically. They are often misunderstood, ridiculed, even attacked. Why? Because their existence exposes the lie. A person who knows who they are does not bend. They do not conform for applause. They do not compromise their essence for comfort. And in doing so, they remind others of the masks they still wear. This reminder is painful for the enslaved, so they lash out at the free. But the ridicule is proof of authenticity. Only the real identity provokes such resistance. The slave mind will always try to lure you back with its counterfeit identities. It will say, you are your job, you are your reputation, you are your wealth, you are your failures. But none of these are true. They are temporary roles, fleeting moments, external judgments. You are none of these things. You are the one who chooses. You are the one who decides. You are the one who refuses. That is identity, not the mask, but the will behind it. The journey to reclaim identity is lonely. You will lose friends. You will disappoint family. You will confuse the crowd. But what is the alternative? To live an entire life as a stranger to yourself, to go to your grave having never truly met the one person you were meant to know, you. That is the real tragedy. Better to walk the lonely road of authenticity than to march proudly in the crowded parade of imitation. The truth is, identity cannot be given, it cannot be bought, it cannot be inherited, it can only be chosen. And once you choose it, once you carve it from the stone of your soul with the chisel of your will, it becomes unshakable. No system can define it. No enemy can destroy it. No fear can silence it. The slave mind may try, but the free identity does not bow. To live without identity is to live as a shadow. To live with it is to walk in fire. And though the fire may burn, it illuminates the path. The slave mind wants you in the dark, wearing its mask, repeating its script. But the moment you tear off the mask, the moment you throw away the script, you declare to the world and to yourself, I am not who you say I am who I choose to be. Freedom is not a word to be spoken lightly. It is not a slogan to be repeated or a banner to be waved in parades. Freedom is heavy, and those who truly seek it must understand the weight of its cost. The slave mind thrives on convincing people that freedom is effortless, that it is a gift handed down, that it requires nothing more than gratitude. But real freedom is never free. It is earned, it is defended, and above all, it is paid for with sacrifice. The first sacrifice is comfort. Comfort is the currency of slavery, and it is willingly traded for security. People choose the easy road because it promises less pain, fewer struggles, fewer uncertainties. The slave mind thrives here, whispering that comfort is happiness, that safety is success, that staying within the familiar is wisdom. Yet every time you choose comfort over courage, you pay for it with your freedom. Every compromise made to avoid discomfort is another brick laid in the wall of your own prison. The second sacrifice is illusion. Most people prefer the warm embrace of a lie to the cold bite of truth. Illusions are beautiful. They shield you from reality's harsh edges. They paint a life where all is well, where suffering can be ignored. But those illusions come at a cost. They blind you. They strip you of clarity. They keep you enslaved to systems that profit from your blindness. To be free, you must be willing to shatter illusions, even if the truth beneath them cuts deep. Freedom demands that you stare into the mirror without filters, without excuses, without the masks that once kept you comfortable. The third sacrifice is belonging. The slave mind survives by keeping you chained to the herd. It tells you that belonging is everything, that to be different, to stand apart, to resist the majority is to be dangerous, even foolish. And so many stay silent to remain accepted. They live inauthentically to remain included. They play the role demanded of them to stay loved. But freedom cannot exist where conformity rules. To claim your freedom is to risk exile. You must accept that the crowd may turn against you, that the herd may label you mad, arrogant, or dangerous. True freedom may leave you standing alone, but in that solitude lies the proof of your authenticity. The fourth sacrifice is time. Freedom cannot be purchased instantly. It demands years of struggle, of learning, of failing, of rising again. The slave mind thrives on instant gratification, promising quick pleasures and immediate rewards. But the free mind knows that the path is long and the climb is steep. To resist the slave mind, you must invest time where others waste it. You must study when others sleep, act when others hesitate, endure when others quit. Freedom is a harvest, And it only belongs to those willing to sow relentlessly, knowing the reward may not come tomorrow or even next year, but eventually it will. And the greatest sacrifice of all is certainty. Slavery offers certainty. The path is paved. The rules are clear. The future is predictable. Freedom strips away that certainty and demands faith in the unknown. It forces you to walk paths no one has walked before, to carve roads through wilderness, to face days when nothing is guaranteed. The slave mind clings to certainty because in certainty lies control. The free mind embraces uncertainty because only in uncertainty lies possibility. Make no mistake, freedom has a cost, and many are unwilling to pay it. They prefer the illusion of liberty while living chained to their fears, their routines, their borrowed identities. But those who dare, those who embrace sacrifice, become something untouchable. They are no longer manipulated by comfort, blinded by illusion, or bound by the herd. They no longer waste time or cling to certainty. They live in truth, in risk, in power. The road to freedom is not decorated with applause. It is lined with doubt, resistance, and hardship. But at the end of that road stands a throne that no one can take away. A throne carved from self-mastery, from independence, from unshakable will. That is the price of freedom. And though it is steep, it is worth everything. Because what is life without it? Better to bleed for freedom than to breathe in chains. Better to walk alone in truth than to march with the herd in lies. Better to sacrifice comfort, illusion, belonging, time, and certainty than to sell your soul for ease. Because at the end of it all, the chains will rust, the masks will fall, the illusions will fade, and only freedom will remain. Victory over the slave mind is not a single event. It is not a moment where the sky opens, the chains shatter, and freedom descends like a gift. Victory is a war fought in silence, in solitude, in the battlefield of thought where no applause is heard and no witnesses stand. It is not glamorous. It is not sudden. It is a relentless daily choice. And that is why so few achieve it. The slave mind is clever. It does not fight you with open violence. It does not storm your gates with armies or announce its presence with a trumpet. Instead, it returns quietly, like smoke seeping through cracks, like a whisper echoing in the back of your skull. It tells you to take the easy option, to avoid the difficult question, to surrender the uncomfortable truth. And if you are not vigilant, you find yourself back in chains before you even realized you left the battlefield. Victory, therefore, is not about one great rebellion. It is about vigilance. It is about choosing again and again to resist. When the slave mind says, stay silent, you speak. When it says, stay safe, you act. When it says, be like them, you refuse. Each of these small, defiant choices is a battle won. Each of these choices sharpens your blade. And with enough of them, a war is won. But victory does not mean the voice of the slave mind disappears forever. No, it lingers, it waits. It tests you in moments of weakness. This is why true victory is not about destroying the slave mind. It is about mastering it. The chains may still exist, but they no longer bind you. The whispers may still speak, but they no longer control you. Freedom is not the absence of temptation. It is the strength to refuse it. Consider this: the slave mind thrives on fear, on conformity, on illusion. Victory over it is not simply rejecting those things, but transforming them. Fear becomes fuel. Conformity becomes clarity. Illusion becomes insight. The very weapons once used against you become the tools you wield for liberation. That is true mastery, when the slave mind's tricks no longer weaken you but strengthen you. And victory is not only personal. When you defeat the slave mind within yourself, you ignite a spark in others. Your defiance becomes a mirror that forces them to see their own chains. Your freedom becomes an invitation that dares them to question theirs. Some will reject it because the light hurts eyes accustomed to darkness. But others will see, and once seen, it cannot be unseen. In this way, victory spreads. One liberated mind becomes a signal fire for 100 more. Yet you must never forget, victory has no finish line. There is no final day when the war ends, no final hour when the mind is free forever. Every sunrise brings the choice again. Resist or surrender. To live free is to fight daily. To remain free is to refuse daily. The world will try to drag you back into the herd, the illusions, the cages, but the free mind remembers. It remembers the cost, the sacrifices, the struggle, and it refuses to be enslaved again. This is why victory over the slave mind is the highest form of triumph. It cannot be bought, it cannot be gifted, it cannot be stolen. It is earned moment by moment, choice by choice, battle by battle. And once it is yours, it makes you untouchable. No ruler can enslave you. No system can silence you. No fear can bind you. Because the only chains that ever existed were in your mind, and you have broken them. To walk with that victory is to live a life beyond imitation, beyond control, beyond fear. It is to live as a being who belongs to no one and nothing except the truth you choose to stand on. That is the highest crown, the greatest treasure, the ultimate prize of existence. And so the war continues, but the victor walks tall. The slave mind may whisper, but the free mind roars. The chains may rattle, but they cannot hold. The world may press, but it cannot bend you. For you have resisted, you have endured, you have conquered, and the victory is yours. Here's a strong ending that ties all 8 chapters together, keeping the same voice and intensity. And so the question is no longer whether the slave mind exists. You know it does. The question is whether you will bow to it or whether you will rise against it, whether you will wear its mask and live quietly in chains, or whether you will tear the mask away and live fiercely in truth. The war is not out there. It is within you. Every thought you accept, every fear you surrender to, every comfort you cling to decides which side you fight for. Freedom is not a gift, it is a responsibility. It is not given, it is seized. It is not cheap, it is priceless. So tonight, let this not be just words you heard and then forgot. Let this be the moment where you draw a line in the sand of your own mind and declare, I will not bow. I will not conform. I will not live as a slave to fear, to illusion, to silence, to lies, because in the end, the greatest victory a human being can ever achieve is not wealth, not fame, not power. It is the victory over the slave mind. Break the chains, resist the whispers, live free. And when the world looks at you and wonders how you became unshakable, untouchable, unstoppable, you will know the answer. Because I refuse to live as a prisoner in my own mind. Resist the slave mind, because the only chains that can ever hold you are the ones you refuse to break.